In this video, we're going to talk about how to use your metronome when you were given a metronome marking that said eighth note equals something. And not all of the notes in what you're practicing are eighth notes. I notice that for a lot of my young students, we can get eighth notes happening, but the relationship of eighth notes to quarter notes does not always stay real great. And especially when we start using a metronome, they struggle to play the eighth notes perfectly in time when the click is only a quarter note. They will go too fast through the eighth notes and then just kind of tumble their way through, or they try to move their bow with each click and then they turn their eighth notes into quarter notes, because that's kind of what we've been doing, right? Quarter note equals your bow moving. Every click is a bow. So in these situations, I will sometimes have my students put their metronome on the eighth note, but then we need to reverse engineer the subdivision, right? If we're always hearing the eighth notes, what happens when we have something that isn't an eighth note? So the example I'm going to use here is Essential Elements Book 1, number 85, High Flying. We've got eighths, quarters, and half notes here. So let's say that your teacher has requested that you practice this eighth note equals 100, and I'll show you how we would write that. We would draw a little eighth note, boop, boop. One eighth note has the flag, and we draw equals, and then whatever number we want you to practice that at. So, got my metronome set here, 100. I also have it clicking without any sort of beat accenting. I don't have it set to 2 beats in a measure or 4 beats in a measure or anything like that, because I guess you could use it with 4 beats in a measure at this speed, but it gets a little tricky if your metronome is giving you a certain subdivision of the beat, making sure that the accented beat is always going to line up on beat 1. It can be a little bit hard. Many metronomes also give you the option to set a tempo and then add a subdivision. So on this, or most metronomes, whether it's an app online or a little box, I could go half of 100, which would be 50. So that would be my quarter note speed. That gives me the big beat of the measure. So if I go down to 50, that's really slow, and it can be hard to find and think what eighth notes are. So on this particular metronome, I press, oopsies, it's a little old, press one button, and you're hearing the eighth note at a different sound. This I like, but sometimes younger students can't quite pick up on that just yet, and so it's totally fine to just have your metronome clicking at one single sound representing the eighth notes for everything. So we're going to go back to that. I'm going to set it at 100, and that's just the sound that it makes will be the eighth note. So we need to figure out, when I play a quarter note, how many clicks should I hear? And when I play a half note, how many clicks should I hear? If there are 2 eighths in 1 quarter, that means that in each of these quarter notes, if each click here is a note, then I will hear 2 clicks and a half note. And we can also, it's pretty obvious how many clicks we're going to be hearing in a measure here, because we got 2 beats in a measure. So a half note, no matter whether it's just a single half note in a measure or if there are 2 half notes in a measure, if you're in 4/4, you are always going to hear 4 eighth note clicks for a half note. So let me grab my instrument here, and I will hope we're still in tune. It's been a little hot and humid around here lately, so if I turn on my metronome, this is what this would sound like. These are eighth notes, so my bow will move with each click when I see eighth notes, and I have to think and hold longer if it's not an eighth note. So here I go, if you want to play along. 1, 2, ready, go. student gets more comfortable, you might be able to either speed up the eighth note click or go back to the quarter note click, maybe use that to your advantage where you have the quarter note click and the subdivision is a different sound rather than all the same thing. You can transition around, experiment with it, but that is the basic idea of how to use a metronome. If it's not just quarter notes, if your metronome is on a subdivision, something smaller than every beat in the measure. I'm just assuming that you know how to use a metronome regularly, so hope that cleared something up. If anybody needed that assistance, good luck and happy practicing.